welcome back to Life on the French. Today is Friday, so it's Free Speech Friday. And today we have a couple cases to talk about. One of them takes place in Iowa. Another takes place in Virginia. So let's start with Iowa, shall we? So in Iowa, according to the Des Moines Register, and again, I will link all of the articles that I'm discussing in the description box down below if you want to follow along or find more information. The article is titled, Iowa University's Free Speech Training May Be in Place for Fall, but no initial penalty for not doing it. So earlier this year, Iowa decided that they wanted to have free speech training at their state universities. There were a couple of different events that led to the creation of this training. The training right now is planning to be a 15 to 20 minute presentation put together by a company that the state of Iowa is funding. However, there's no punishment this year for not completing the training because it's a transition year. But what led to the need to have free speech training for students, faculty, and staff? So the first incident takes place at Iowa State in the summer of 2020, where an English syllabus prohibited students from submitting material that, quote, takes its base that one side doesn't deserve the same basic human rights as you do, i.e., no arguments against gay marriage, abortion, Black Lives Matter, etc., end quote. So, obviously, this is viewpoint discrimination. People have different opinions on these topics. In Iowa, these are all open questions. Now, I can see why this professor wanted to create a space that was safe. As a bisexual person, yeah, it is hard to be in a class where people argue that I shouldn't be able to marry whoever I want to marry. And as a woman, it's hard for me to hear arguments that I shouldn't have control over my body. But at the same time, the idea that you would be punished in your grade because you have a specific political opinion that is not that uncommon is a violation of free speech in that it's viewpoint discrimination. So that's one reason why free speech training is being implemented at the schools. Then in October, student government leaders at the University of Northern Iowa denied a student's request to form an anti-abortion advocacy group. It's important to note that the University of Northern Iowa's president did allow the anti-abortion group to form on campus. However, it led to, this notion that maybe students don't understand why they can't just ban a club based on its views, especially, again, such mainstream views as being anti-abortion. And then also in mid-October, the University of Iowa College of Dentistry, their leadership, including their dean, David Johnson, emailed students, faculty, and staff to condemn the 13950 Trump administration executive order. And this sparked a debate when one student, Michael Brace, said he supported the executive order, and then the dentistry school summoned Brace to a disciplinary hearing for unprofessional conduct, which the administrator cited as his decision to use a public platform to share his views to support the executive order. So obviously this is again the university punishing a student for a political viewpoint. Now it's important to remember that in all of these cases in Iowa, not only are they pretty mainstream, I mean, even if they, are offensive to some, they're pretty mainstream views, and they're political views. And political views have the highest amount of scrutiny when it comes to protection. So it takes a lot to censor somebody's political speech, and none of these cases meet that criteria, which is why Iowa decided that they wanted to do this free speech training. I think it's fair to criticize Iowa's decision to go with a company in making a free speech 15 to 20 minute online video thing. I don't know if that's the best use of money. I also think I can understand why they want to go outside of the education system, since they are trying to train faculty as well. But presumably some of their faculty members are, specialize in this issue. So it would be interesting to see if they could pull from, their experts as well as their graduate schools of education to put a program together that might be more effective, or pull from another university's experts. Just a thought. But that's what led to Iowa's training for student, faculty, and staff. Now, I said there was a second case. This one takes place in Virginia. This is from Fox News. Virginia parents sue school district over alleged racial discrimination and free speech violations. The lawsuit accuses Loudoun County of racially discriminating against white students. So, in the link that I'll be leaving below in the description, there's an interview with a parent from the school who is arguing that the school is discriminating against white students. There are two basic ideas to this alleged discrimination. The first one just seems to be an objection to teaching critical race theory in schools. Now, critical race theory, according to the school district, is actually not being taught in schools. However, parents are arguing that enough of the same terminology is used that it's basically critical race theory. Now, as someone who has studied critical race theory in education, it's a very specific program. I'm going to leave a link to a book I read about how to teach critical race theory and what critical race theory is in the description as well, if you're interested in learning more about that. But if the school says it isn't teaching it, it probably isn't teaching it. That doesn't mean it's not teaching about things like privilege or discrimination or inequality. But critical race theory is a very specific way of teaching those things. And it's not necessarily bad. I'm not saying it's different to take away from the value of critical race theory being taught in schools. It's just that I doubt that it is being taught if the school says it's not being taught. It's just probably, like I said, like the parents are saying, using some of the same terminology. But that terminology is shared not just in critical race theory, but across kind of the history curriculum that focuses more on the disparity and the history of discrimination in the United States. So it's not specific to critical race theory, even if some of the terms originate from critical race theory. So the parents are arguing that this curriculum is chilling free speech. Now, I briefly mentioned chilling speech in last week's episode, so I will link that video up here. But chilling speech is where you are punished, or you perceive that you're going to be treated differently or looked at differently or punished in a severe way. So much so that you're afraid to share your own political opinions in school. So last week we talked about how some of the treatment to gay students and the bullying that happens and the change in teachers' perspectives of those students can chill students' ability to come out, like to speak their truth. Here they're arguing that this critical race theory, in conjunction with the Equity Student Ambassador Program, is chilling conservative free speech. For that to be true, the program would have to have some kind of disciplinary follow-up to students who, like specifically to the students that do speak up and argue against or have microaggressions or what have you. Now, the plaintiffs include multiple anonymous persons in addition to 2 county activists, Scott Mineo of Parents Against Critical Theory and Patty Hidalgo, members of the Loudoun Republican Women's Club. They've both been outspoken in the outgoing battle between parents, teachers, and administrators who harbor sharply different views about so-called equity and diversity training. It is going to court. It will be addressed, whether or not these 2 actions have violated student speech rights, either directly or through a chilling effect. So only time will tell. The child plaintiffs, who were listed anonymously, purportedly wouldn't meet the LCPC's criteria for the ambassador program because their views on social justice are not aligned to those of LCPS. This is kind of interesting. So in a response to the frequently asked questions about a white child potentially serving in the ambassador program, the county said, quote, "Thank you for your interest, but this opportunity is specifically for students of color. However, students in each school have an option of creating an affinity group for students of color who all share a similar racial identity, and they may also include allies," end quote. So emails show that an LCPS administrator told a parent that, quote, "Though all students, white or otherwise, are more than welcome to potentially serve as ambassadors, their focus is to raise the voice of their classmates of color during these meetings," end quote. And I think that makes sense. At least it makes sense in the idea that if the equity that they're focusing on is racial equity, students of colors are going to be on the receiving end of the microaggressions, and it makes sense that their voices need more space. It's also true, studies have found that teachers are more likely to call on white students than students of color. It's also true that students of color are more ignored in schools. They also tend to be put into remedial programs at different rates than white students. It's also true, and I don't know if it's true for this specific school, but in the US, it is a fact that for the same action, the same breaking of a rule, Black students receive a harsher punishment than white students. So if we're going to have an equity group about race, I do think that emphasizing students of color's voices and listening to their experiences is important and is grounded in the facts surrounding race in school research. And that information is not listed in this article. It is listed in the book that I will be linking if you want to read about it. You can also find studies about it. Teachers or authors who have written about this, I will link below. I am blanking on one of the best books about this that uses quantitative research to prove this, but I will put that book in the description down below as well. And in addition, school doesn't have a means of punishing bias incidents. It's more about, according to the school, collecting student stories of discrimination and identifying trends. The trends are identified through adults in the school, and then if they see a trend, that is brought up to the ambassadors. So the student ambassadors aren't actually the ones identifying trends or collecting incidents or that sort of thing. It's being filtered through adults, and then the ambassadors look at the trends and kind of discuss ideas on how to address those trends with the student body, rather than it being a way to target people who have said things that might be off color. And there's no consequence from filling out the form. The school has also said for students, if you are feeling discriminated against, or you have something you want to share, or there's a bias incident, to continue to file the reports. The system will remain in place until the lawsuit is decided, so continue acting on that and using the school policy. Going back to the critical race theory, the conservative news website, the Daily Wire, previously reported on how the leadership of the district's Minority Student Achievement Advisory Committee proposed punishing teachers if they criticize equity training. Quote, that simply cannot and should not be tolerated by anyone employed by LCPS, end quote, the chair of the Minority Student Achievement Advisory Committee, Kiera Jennings, reportedly wrote. She then appeared to call for teachers to be dismissed if they did not fully embrace diversity training. So here's the thing about embracing a school's policy. As a teacher, if the school has a policy and has trainings, it is not uncommon for schools to say, this is what we're doing, this is our curriculum. If you don't want to teach the curriculum we have, you can leave. This does not just apply to diversity training. It also applies to all of the trainings that happen in the summer. You have to complete sexual harassment training. You have to complete CPR training. One summer, I know teachers in Indiana were instructed to read a book about setting student goals. And if they didn't have goals listed on the whiteboard, and objectives for the day, as well as long-term goals, that would go on to their report as a negative review. So there's actually a lot less freedom that teachers have in the classroom, because they are employees of the school district. So if the school district has a policy, teachers have to follow that policy. It doesn't mean that they can't try to argue why the policy is wrong in a professional capacity, but it is not specific to just diversity training. It is true of all trainings, and that's where I think this article is a little biased. I think that it makes it out to seem like these things are specific to race issues, that they're specific to diversity training, that all diversity training is critical race theory, which it is not, that all curriculum that addresses racial inequities is critical race theory, which it is not. And it seems like the school is allowing white students to be in the ambassador program. But the goal is to emphasize students of color's voices, because it seems to be focused on racial issues. That seems very normal to me. And the idea that they have to have a specific view of social justice also isn't that surprising. They're not saying that other students can't form a group that has a different view of social justice or doesn't agree with social justice at all. But for the group they have certain requirements that they would like. And that's true of basically any leadership program in a school. That's like one that you apply to be a part of. If you think about like who is selected to be on the school board, that's usually nominated by teachers, chosen by teachers, and the students usually have to meet a specific set of requirements and typically agree with the school board. So I just think we should put this into context. But it does seem, it is a free speech case. It is going to court. I'll be interested to see what the other side has to say. Obviously, Fox News has its own specific thoughts on free speech issues. They tend to support them when they agree. They seem to agree that this is a violation of conservative free speech. So I'll be interested to see what the lawsuit has to say. I wasn't able to find a liberal-leaning article about this. If I do find one, eventually I will link it in the description. But that's why I'm arguing, devil's advocate so much in this case, just because I know Fox News is left-leaning, and I want to make sure that the information I am presenting is representative of research in general, as well as pointing out a little bit of the weakness in this piece. So if you found this video informative, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of our content, click subscribe, ding the bell button to know when we post, which is every day, but free speech is on Fridays. And most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!